It's Saturday. It's time for the Saturday Salon. For 6 years straight, we have been broadcasting the Saturday Salon, but it has always been kept as a very well kept secret within a community of business leaders. But we decided 3, 4 weeks ago, let's take it to everyone. We don't want to sit with these conversations all by ourselves. For those 6 years, I've had a co host with me, Michele Wucker. Many of you already know her. She's a well-renowned author and teacher and strategist and whatnot. As she said last week, you cannot put Michele in any box. And today, I'm so happy, Michele, that you're going to join me because if there's something that you care about, it's risk-taking and people's risk profile. So I bet that you're excited about discussing strategy today with our guest today.
I am indeed.
Well, let's dive into it. So, first and foremost, we have Ganzo Ulziibayar today with us, a good friend of mine that I met many years ago. I have been very lucky to study at NTU in Singapore, HCO UST in Hong Kong. I've done a trip to Mongolia, and Ganzo also visited me in San Francisco 2 years ago. So I've been lucky to call him my friend for quite some years. Ganzo, welcome and happy Saturday.
Yes, thank you, Soulaima.
Are you tuning in live from Mongolia today?
Yes, that's right. Currently, I'm in UB, so
UB, yeah,
yeah,
the
very, very
capital of.
happy to be here.
We are so as well. So, Ganzo, you grew up in Mongolia in the very same landscape that produced the history's most effective strategists. And mind you that I'm saying that in plural. There is not only just one strategist, but many strategists that has come out of Mongolia. And that's something we are going to dive into today. You have done 15 years of independent research into the subconscious foundations of strategic judgment, a topic that both Michele and myself are super excited about. And in fact, I don't think any leaders are not fascinated by this topic, and you have so much to offer, so we are so excited about that. You became a CEO of the age of just 27, and you've spent 2 decades building companies and teaching strategy. You're also the founder of the education reform movement, the founding chairman of Mandel Financial Group, and you are, of course, also a World Economic Forum young global leader like Michele and myself. And you're also the founder of the World Financial History Museum. So quite an impressive resume. So one thing that goes through your whole life is finance, finances, and strategy. Is that fair to say? And leadership.
Yeah, and teaching is my passion. Yeah,
And
teaching
teaching
and
is your
writing.
passion.
Yeah.
Gosh, and now you have also authored numerous books, and your recent book, Strategy is Attitude. The Missing Half of Strategy has become an international bestseller. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So tell us about strategy is attitude. I thought strategy was method. I thought strategy was framework, not attitude. What is it with strategy and attitude, and how do they go together?
Yeah, so as Buddha said, right, every path leads to the same destination. So this book is the final destination for me, at least during my lifetime, four different paths. One path is the subconscious analysis, because when I became CEO, after perhaps 2 or 3 years later, I realized that my main mission was to improve the productivity of my employees, because my question was how to increase the salaries and bonuses of my staff and how to make them happy. And then the only way I discovered was to improve their productivity. Then I started studying the productivity methodology, which is more on the conscious mind side, the analytical, the framework, the tools, right? To improve the bonus scheme, to improve the working condition, to provide training, vocational training. But then the more I researched, the more it became clear that subconscious factors are key to productivity. So that's how I gradually shifted my attention from these superficial, process-oriented world to more subconscious, sometimes psychological, sometimes philosophical foundations. And that was one path. The other one, of course, I was CEO. I never worked more than 4 years in one company, so I switched many different companies. So during of course, I lost maybe hundreds of millions of dollars, but I also made billions of dollars for people. So my main task was strategy, the strategy formulation, to be the leader, to create the strategy for the organization. So I've tested this on many different organizations, and I read and researched every strategy framework out there, which was written during last 70 years, mostly from business schools, right? And sometimes by famous CEOs themselves. And to my frustration, on paper, they looked great. They make sense. But as soon as I try to apply them to real world situations, kind of fails. And sometimes my lieutenants, my executives, they wouldn't understand those frameworks like KPIs, balanced scorecards, positioning, SWOT analysis, and all those different frameworks. And that's the strategy research. And I thought the current strategy framework or theoretical landscape was not there yet. So that's one thing. And then third one, the philosophy route, because I hated education when I was in high school. I almost expelled and I couldn't get to college because I was a bad student, right? So I get into philosophy quite late on when I was 26 years old, right? So by the time most people already familiar with all the philosophical concepts. So
Just in
but I
time to
did it.
become a CEO.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So everything happened when I was around 25, 26. So yeah, and then I I wanted to be a good person. I wanted to be a high moral person. So I searched for the ethics and the morals and the virtues. And that path also led me to this new strategies attitude theory, the subconscious, the lived CEO experience, and the philosophical quest. And then yeah, I almost forgot the fourth path, which is my job as chair of education reform movement, because I hated education and I remember there were so many kids like me who had nothing wrong with their IQ, EQ, or whatever, right? But they just didn't fit in the school. We were misfits. But then we were labeled as bad kids. We were just kids. Who could define as bad or good? We were just 10, 12, 14-year-old kids. So, and then many of my friends, they were labeled hooligans, street kids, and then they died very, very early on, like as soon as they are over 30, because they kept drinking, they continued the lifestyle. And because I used to drink when I was in high school and smoke. So I think I was a bad influence. But then those kids died. And then today, when I remember my friends, they could have been excellent salespeople. I dream such salespeople, the street smart kids, right? But then they were wrongly labeled by the education system. So I wanted to save half of the kids in the schools today. Of course, half thrive, but the another half is lost. So this also led me to the strategist kid concept at the same time. Every kid is right. Every kid is good. So, but modern education system needs to adapt and come up with different ways and methodologies to awaken the inner potential of every kids, right? So these four paths all led to this strategies attitude framework.
So, Ganzo, did you have a single aha moment that people need to connect attitude and strategy, or was it like a gradual realization? I mean, what made you all of a sudden realize how important those two were, and particularly thinking about those schoolmates? What a tragic waste of potential.
Yes. So feel so sorry about them. I think it was many failures, falling down, anxiety, stress, depression, and then get up with new revelation and make some money, new friends or new businesses, learn some new things, and then again fall down, big depression, big anxiety, fear and feeling that helpless. I don't know anything. I thought I was great. So I think at least like a dozen such moments led to here, and I can see more failures in the future. Yeah.
Well, embracing failure is such an important part of attitude, understanding that failure is just learning one or more or 1,000 ways not to do something, and picking yourself back back up again.
Exactly, exactly. So the key thing, the three attitudes that makes everyone and anyone a strategist, and the activator mechanism, which is called felt responsibility, that kept me strong and powerful because for many years, almost like now 18 years, I was searching the true source of power, how to be a powerful person. And then I've been writing a blog since 2007. So I checked my blog a couple of days ago. So I was writing around 2008 and 2009. The secret of a power is felt responsibility, right? So I wrote that many years ago, but then it was revealed just recently as the activating mechanism for a strategist, because strategist does need a huge source of power, because I mean everyone and everything's trying to kill that person, right? Everyone's saying you can't do this, and everyone's trying to get a piece of that person, so it's a very difficult job actually. So that person has to have this unstoppable source of power, which is felt responsibility towards other people. Could be your
Is that
followers,
something
your
you can
country.
teach?
Yeah.
Is that something you can
Sorry.
teach or something you're just born with? And if it's something you can teach,
Uh,
how do you teach it?
I would say it's in between because everyone's born with this capability, So I always, when I teach to my students, my strategy students, I tell them, remember the mother animals. Or sometimes I take an example of single mothers, right? So there's a strange statistic in Mongolia. Maybe I'm sure it's universal everywhere else. We have 500 people per period as suicide, right? And 400 of them were men, only 100 women. So I didn't dive into the statistical models, but I was telling my students, perhaps the reason is mother animals, they are very strong. Why? They are smaller. The muscular mass is smaller. Skeleton is smaller, but how? It's because the responsibility of mother animal towards their offspring, right? So responsibility gives you a great power. And then people who've had this felt responsibility, they actually can sacrifice their lives for the sake of others. Yeah. So I would say it's an innate capability that's born in everyone else. And then you just need to find your purpose.
And yet, not only did he conquer the world like no one else in history without modern communication and an army that was feared worldwide. But my point is, he taught other people strategy, and they were farmers or herding sheep in the mountains, right? So he taught us that anyone can learn strategy. Is that fair to say, Ganzo? I don't know if you feel like diving into that, but I think that's fascinating because you might think that strategy are for those who are belonging to the elite or go to fine universities or can study very thick books, and they are in a political environment where they can practice. But you are saying with your book, strategy is an attitude. Is that true? Is that correctly understood?
Yeah, I think you're totally correct here because I also studied Genghis Khan strategy and Mongol Command System last 20 years. Not because I am Mongolian, but it's quite interesting how you start with nothing and then during a lifetime subdue the strongest and the biggest empires every direction. So this didn't happen before him and was not repeated after him as well. So yeah, you're correct. The modern strategy framework, the corporate world or political systems, they all talk about positioning advantage. So you go to this university, or you are born into a rich family, or you have these connections with these higher ups, then you land a nice corporate job in a big Wall Street firm, or you have these natural resources that you are born with, and then you use that to take over other smaller countries, you know. So it's like it's all positioning advantage and the privilege. So the money and technology and the numbers in favor of you. That's how you subdue the weak, the underprivileged, the poor, the few, right? So I think this is wrong. I mean, from global geopolitical perspective and the corporate business perspective, it's wrong. I think Genghis Khan, to me, is an inspiration because, as you said, he started with nothing and everyone was against him. And when he finally unified Mongolian tribes after fighting 20 years, at the age of 44, actually, he was 44, that old, you know, it took him that long. It was only about 1 million people, no economic advantage, no technology, no numerous advantage, right? No organized army or academies. But then he immediately faced the richest, the biggest, and most advanced empires during that time. There were at least three in the current China proper and hugely rich Khwarezmian Empire, the modern day Iran and the ancient Persia, Transoxania, and the Rus and Kuman and the Seljuk Turks. Then the interesting thing is he had about 100,000 people army, and then he divided his army into five different pieces, very small armies, and then he started engaging five different fronts on two different continents, right? So I mean, what did he have? Nothing. So this is only explained by strategy, the discipline, the organization, the tactical brilliance, all those things. So that's why I was very interested in studying Genghis Khan because I think Genghis Khan's strategy and this inspiration is for countries today which are poor in Africa, in Asia, in South America. Those countries need strategy. Why China has strategy and US has strategy, and why cannot some emerging market country cannot have a strategy? You know, they should have a strategy. And then I read all those best-selling macroeconomic books, development economic books. None of them are talking about strategy. There are books called like Why Nations Rise, Why Nations Fall, and then the reason is education, institutional capacity. These are byproducts of strategy. If you do not have strategy, education means nothing. Institutions mean nothing. I mean, come on, Mongolia has all the institutions that are needed to be there. And then look at Europe, for example. Why did Europe lost AI and tech race? They have Oxfords and Cambridges and Sorbonnes. They have money, they have technology, they have education, they have 500 million people, consumers. But then why did they lost AI and tech race to, for example, to a newcomer like China? So it's only explained by strategy. And Japan, by 1990, Japan had everything. Tokyo Stock Exchange was larger than New York Stock Exchange. But then what happened, you know? Why they are losing market share to Taiwan, Korea, and China? So Japan had perhaps strategy in 1950s, brilliant strategy, beautifully executed. And from lost World War II, lost country to global economic superpower within how much? Like 35 years, right? But then it's a plateau. They lost the strategy. So I think strategy is behind everything. So if you are the few, the poor, the underprivileged, you know, so you are the minority, then you need strategy. Because when there's no money, no technology, no advantage, you only have one thing left, which is strategy. So that's why I really want to make everyone in this world, especially those underprivileged, to awaken their strategies inside their subconscious.
Hey, Ganzo, one of the things that I think makes your book so powerful is that it draws on your experience at Mondal Financial Group and the new lines of business that you've developed. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, maybe some real life examples about how you have applied this blend of strategy and attitude, you know, to your company, but also to you personally? And then one of the things that I've really noticed is that there's such a close link between people's own self-awareness and embracing risk and being smart and risk aware and savvy, and how they've applied some of that to their businesses. And I think that you are such a great example of it.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I think that's too much of a high of a praise for me. So yeah, I think lately I realized that I was very lucky because I spent very formative young age with my grandparents who were retired teachers from city and went to the back to old living style, the nomadic style. So after retiring, they went back to countryside and got sheep, horses, cattle, just like the Genghis Khan time of Mongol nomadic family. So I was there. So I started herding animals, sheep in the mountains far from home when I was since from age 5 and started riding horse. I mean, that's normal for Mongol kids, right? So yeah, that was that. But then lately I realized that actually was foundational to create this risk awareness in me, right? Because there's no boxed environment. The four walls and the ceiling and the teacher, security guards protecting you. So you're just by yourself. Only sky is above you, the sun, the rain, the wind. And then also you have to protect your animals. And you have your horse and you're in the mountains. And then if there are stray dogs or maybe wolves, you gotta be there, you know. You look after your animals. So every evening you have to, my grandparents would count the flock, you know, if I had caused the missing animal. Right. So I think that situational awareness instilled this during this nomadic upbringing, I think is very important. I think this can be applied to every education system around the world. This is very helpful to kids, especially now. And I think this has helped to create my group because I was always an operator working in big corporations, but then there was always a frustration. As soon as I get to a certain point, I started to have this ideological difference between the owners, right? Most of the owners are unluckily, they are just only after money, profit or power. And even a listed company, like public listed company, the boards are filled with so-called corporate politicians, right? They only have a motive of the self-interest, nothing else. So that's why I decided to create my own business. And in country like Mongolia and especially Central Asia region, most of the big businesses are taken by oligarchs, right? Tycoons or whatever. So difficult businesses are left, like insurance and capital markets or microfinance, those sorts of business. So I think it was a natural choice in the beginning. But as I tried to build up my group, I just realized an immense risk management need by the people and the capital market need. Because most capital markets operators in the developed world, they just become operators, right? They just become a cell of a big body and they don't understand any longer what is the body is doing. You are just a small cell just sitting there. But then I had a chance to feel the capital markets, right? I wanted to use this word, feel, because I realized capital market is the only mechanism for just full wealth distribution, equal wealth distribution. This is a beautiful system. And along this journey, I have discovered some very important revelations that are not written on macroeconomic textbooks, like how Otto von Bismarck created the first social security system and how that started pension fund revolution and that fed to capital markets. And in fact, actually, I wrote another book called Financial Philosophy or Philosophy of Finance 10 years ago upon my study of 3,000 year financial history of humanity. So it's like my group is really built on this love of the common people, you know, to protect them from risks, to enable them with risk tools, and then connect them with capital markets to be participated in this wealth distribution mechanism. So I think of my group and I tell to my executives, Mondel Financial is like an NGO with a side gig, which is happen to be a business, right? So when we do have executive committee meeting, we always talk about national development, pension reform, wealth distribution, public education, and then the profit and loss statements are a tiny bit of our conversation. And I do love that. I think that gives our executives great power, because it's a felt responsibility. We gotta be kicking, otherwise these people will suffer, right? That kind of feeling is very important for today's CEOs around the world, I think.
Well, I love that you pointed out that Otto von Bismarck was the one who created the first social security system. I suspect that most people will be very, very surprised by that. Of course, in the United States, we have our very own sort of dysfunctional conversation about all of those things. The social security system, health insurance, these other sort of quote unquote social safety net things being somehow charity, or people might not deserve it, or there's this ridiculous conversation about it. But Bismarck saw it as something that was an important policy and tool to build prosperity. And of course, insurance and capital markets, those are ways of transferring risk, of allowing people to be more comfortable to take certain risks, because they put a floor on the downside. And, as you talk about developing countries and risk taking, I think so much about the ecosystem around businesses, entrepreneurship, around innovation, which is a huge risk, around education, which is a huge investment of time and energy, and, dysfunctional systems, which you're trying to change as well. And of course, I looked at the Mandala insurance site, which actually talks about sense of purpose being so central to what the company does. And I see how insurance can do that as well. Could you talk just a little bit more about the financial ecosystems, the policy ecosystems, the sort of environment that encourages people to take more quote unquote good risks, and also creates some sort of a ring fence around quote unquote bad risks?
So in the US, Federal Reserve was established long after insurance and capital markets had been established. And unfortunately, many countries, especially emerging countries, modeled their central banks on Federal Reserve, which is totally wrong, because within Federal Reserve mandate, there is no mandate to look at the financial markets, especially insurance and capital markets development. And of course, they call it like a free market economy, that the government should stay away, Adam Smith sort of thing. And then you are correct that what Otto von Bismarck, a German, and I like to joke, two Germans divided the world, right? Karl Marx, a German, and Otto von Bismarck, right? Karl Marx said the factory needs to belong to the workers. Otto von Bismarck said, no, there needs to be a pension fund. So it's very funny. So all those economic philosophy, it evolved so much, and sometimes it went too far ahead and it lost the touch with the reality. So I think this modern day government needs to recalibrate. And if you look at 1600s London, Amsterdam, capital markets development, 1400 banking evolution in Italy, and 1800 capital markets second stage and industrial revolution in London. I think that's when you learn when the systems are not that too complex. I think complexity is something that's making things very hard to understand. And also modern education system is preparing specialists and experts on very narrow topic. So now nobody understands the big picture. So we also need these people called generalists, and some other people called Renaissance men, right? Renaissance women, same thing. So for example, Benjamin Franklin, the founder of US, he was actually, before founding US, he was the chairman of insurance company, right? So he established first ever fire insurance company in the United States. I have a memorabilia from his company, from his insurance company, Philadelphia Contribution Ship, actually. That was the name. So I think the systemic risks, like Nassim Taleb talked about black swans risks, and we experienced 2007. Now we look at the U.S. markets. It seems that there's a huge price inflation when it comes to stocks and properties and other assets. So if there's a rebalancing, like capital outflow from US in favor of emerging markets again, I think that's going to create a huge distress. So who understands these huge systemic risks is one question. The second thing, the livelihoods of common people, right? Like engineers or teachers or doctors, and who's going to manage the risks in the daily lives of those people? And then we had this crypto thing. So many people, like hundreds of millions of people, lost huge amount of money. So I think the amplification of social media is increasing the risk tremendously, especially when it comes to capital markets. And it seems like nobody understands nothing anymore in this complex world. So which means we need strategy even more, right? Strategy is more important than ever. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting that you've mentioned the Federal Reserve, since there's a lot of debate going on right now about the Federal Reserve and its role. And as far as capital markets, I've tended to notice that if markets are struggling, then they're very attentive and they lower rates. But if markets are a little too frothy and a little too over optimistic, like for example, right now, they're very hesitant to pull the punch bowl away from the party, as I hear. And you, of course, very much know whereof you speak as a former monetary policy advisor to the Bank of Mongolia. And so I'm curious, and this is one of my nerdy monetary policy capital markets fascinations. And of course, Bank of Mongolia may have changed direction since you were advising it. But curious as to how you see some of the differences between, say, the Mongolian monetary policy and other countries, say the U.S. on one hand, China, the European systems. Just curious about any of your strategy recommendations for central banks.
Yeah, I think it's wrong to take central banks in isolation. And I think they are not given enough authority in any countries, including US and China and elsewhere, Mongolia, Central Asia. And then at the same time, so many people look up to them as if they are gods, right? So I think there's a huge gap in the reality, the real outcomes that they can deliver, and the perception that people want from them. So I think there's a huge gap. But then in this complex world where many nations are competing for the global markets, many big corporations are defining the global markets, and now American tech companies competing with Chinese companies, and then they are taking over European customers, South American customers, Southeast Asian customers. I think we're using maybe American technology now, right? So I think there's a huge, so many players acting. And then now we have this backpedaling on globalization as if development is a zero-sum game. If America benefits, then China must suffer. Or if China rises, Mongolia must suffer. I think this is a very wrong direction. I think development is a multiplication game. Every country can be rich. And in the past, many countries, like bigger countries, try to suppress their smaller neighbors. If that will be the policy of China, then that's the same curse, same mistake. So when it comes to central bank, I mean, what's the problem? The biggest problem of a central bank when I look at Mongolia and Central Asia and Chinese and elsewhere, central banks. It's the populist government, right? All the time. It's the publicly elected government officials who wants to distribute money, right? Print money or engage in unproductive budgetary expansion through huge projects like this dam, this infrastructure, that metro project. And usually because those projects are waste of money, and that's the net negative impact on the economy. And that's the headache of central bankiers. So I think central bankiers need to consider the education, the economic and financial education of the general population. But if they are not allowed to do that, to run education program, we are central bankers, we don't touch education. Financial literacy, risk awareness is not our concern. Then they will be doomed, and they are being doomed right now. So I think central bank policy sphere should be expanded a bit by themselves, and by nature, by balance sheet, they are very rich organizations, and they are very powerful because politicians always, respect central bankers. So yeah, that's my take.
That's well. I see so many central banks are seen as the lender of last resort, a sort of insurer. I want to ask another geeky question before I'll let Soulaima bring us back to a bigger picture. But since I'm fascinated by insurance, I'm very curious about the insurance scene in Mongolia. What's insurance penetration like? Or is it or do you just do commercial, or what's how has it grown over the years, and also particularly around climate issues? We're seeing a lot of stories in the United States that particularly in hurricane or wildfire prone areas, insurers are pulling out because they can't, they won't insure at any price. And, of course, in the US, there, early days, there was a lot of life insurance. So just curious as what kinds of insurance are the biggest part of the market, which are the parts that have the most potential growth, and particularly how does climate fit into all of it?
Thank you. So I was reading some historical book. So since 1970s, Mongolia, when it was a communist state, they used to insure their herders from natural catastrophe. When it's a natural catastrophe in Mongolia, it's a harsh winter. So the animals have nothing to eat, right? So that's the only catastrophe Mongolia has, because Mongolia is sitting very high in 1.5 kilometers above sea level, and it's a dry country, right? So God bless, there's not much of earthquake or flood or those types of risk, but harsh winter is a real nightmare for the nomadic families, the herding families. And Mongolian Ministry of Finance during communist time, they managed to go to Lloyd's of London and have them take that risk, actually. So that's a very funny story. So I think that's still a big like social responsibility type of country-specific risks that we need to manage. So Mongolian government conducts a program on that. But for the commercial side, it's the usual suspects, the properties, the commercial vehicles, the vehicle insurance, the driver's liability, all those types of insurances are evolving. But the penetration rate is currently very small. It's just about 1% of GDP. So it needs to grow 4 or 5 times more. And when people say my group, Mandal Financial, is the largest insurance group, I say jokingly, the largest group of a very small market, but very high potential to grow, actually. And the biggest hurdle is the risk education, right? The risk literacy, because we were a communist country where state took over everything. In a good sense, it was correct, because state had a huge planning department, like policy planning department, very sophisticated, I would say. And then they took care of every aspect, every facet of its citizens' life. But then when we transferred to 1990s, the democracy and free market, that system was destroyed, but wasn't immediately replaced with the free market institutions, because in free market things take a long time to develop, right? So yeah, we're just trying to be at the forefront of this and try to develop this market. Yeah. And we're also looking to expand to similar Central Asian countries like Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan.
Makes sense, Ganzo. Mongolia is not something most people hear too much about. Now, having lived 10 years in US and spending quite some time in Europe, being from Europe, I don't know about you, Michelle, how often you open the news and hear anything about Mongolia. Maybe it's because you are building some really incredible data centers at the moment or whatever you're doing, but we don't hear much from Mongolia. I can confirm it's a rough environment, tough, kind people that are very adaptive to whatever is going to hit them, right? Because you cannot survive if you're not adaptive. So I think it's in the DNA of the country, and yourself being in the mountains at the age of 5, all by yourself in a harsh environment, responsible for living animals and predators. You were a tiny boy at that time, I think, riding a big horse. That does something, right? And you said, well, a strategy, almost none are taught strategy attitude, right? And I'm just thinking, if you grow up in Chicago, where Michelle is tuning in from, or Brussels or Copenhagen, how on earth do we get the kids and teenagers out wrestling with wild animals, ride a horse? Because they are now sitting mostly indoors on the computers. Maybe their parents are protecting them, rightly so. There's so much going on right now. How do we build that skill set that you are explaining? We need to understand consciously who we are as people, understand our risk profile to stay in Michelle's lane, and also being brave and curious and risk-taking in the most scary/exciting period of time. Many people are impacted one-to-one by climate as we speak. Not only that, they hear that a lot of jobs are disappearing, power balances are being changed, and actively now also at war. No matter where you are, if you are in Europe or Asia, wherever you are in the world, Africa, there is this backdrop of climate change and wars and AI and chains of power. So, again, how do we deal with this? It's so much at the same time, but what can we do? What can we do, us that are not having, we don't have a big horse we can ride out in the desert and build the muscle of resilience and power and all of that?
Yeah, so I would like to say there are a couple of stages. The first thing we need to understand is everyone is born with strategic attitudes. We are human, 4 million year evolution, and we are designed to be strategists. That's the first thing we need to understand. Second thing, the modern education system, social media contents are suppressing that latent capability. Like a couple of things, like wrongful advices, like you don't have to think about anything, you should avoid from anxiety, from fear. But I discovered anxiety is the biggest component of strategy. Fear. Just imagine you entrust your kids to a person who is not fearful, or you entrust your corporation, a big insurance group, as Michelle is very versed in. You entrust a big insurance group to someone who is fearless. So anxiety and fear are actually our power mechanisms, but without a direction, they become a burden. With direction, they become source of energy, right? So I tell my executives, because we manage some 200,000 investors money, sorry, 100,000 investors money. And I tell them, do you wake up at 4 a.m.? You should. If you are not waking up 4 a.m. sweating, then you are not doing your job. So I also used to, maybe 20, 15 years ago, when I wake up at 4 a.m. thinking about my job, I'm like stressed. Why am I waking up early morning? I want to stop it because I was told that was wrong. But then I understood, no, that's the beauty. Now when I wake up, sometimes I wake up maybe once a month, couple of times a month. When I wake up at 4 a.m. thinking about my job, some problem, I smile. I'm happy. Oh, my subconscious is on it. It's doing its job. Okay, let's go back to sleep and let it to solve the problem. So that's the second thing. This modern education system, this and then the research is about leadership, success, performance, and productivity. They only come up with the discovery of appearances of the secret, right? Like your kid needs to be critical thinker. You need to learn problem solving. You need to gain negotiation skills, decision making ability, communication, time management, creativity. They are all facets of appearances or attributes of this subconscious strategic alignment of three attitudes, right? To be a giver, to be a customer perspective, to be a productive person, right? But they should not be like learned memorized words. When you write an essay to Harvard, to apply for Harvard School, write that you are such a good giver, but you're not, right? So this giving is born within everyone. But at the same time, now this is a third revelation. You are born at the same time as a taker. So self-interest and egocentricity is born. It will never be deleted. So even Buddha, an enlightened man, 5 minutes before he died, he still had selfishness in him, right? So we shouldn't forget that. And then at the same time, we have this giving, the empathy, the love, and the capability to sacrifice your life for others' well-being. So we are born with both of these attitudes, subconscious level. But then this modern education system and the social media is feeding this wrong monster, the taker, this monster now by the age of 40, 45, even if you become CEO, chairman, billionaire, or prime minister, congress member, this monster keeps getting bigger. And then the giver, the good side, is not fed, not nurtured, so it's kept small. So I think we need to reverse this process. No matter you were born in Chicago, you are in a boxed room, or you're born in a nomadic situation, it's possible to revive or awaken, awaken these strategic capacities. For example, customer perspective attitude, right? Everyone can feel the other person's feeling and the emotions. So just imagine if you're watching a TV cooking show and then someone's, slicing a bread and then accidentally cut off his finger, or maybe just a small cut. This is too dramatic. So, I mean, everybody would feel bone chill, right? Our wrong feeling in the stomach, right? That just showcases our capacity to be customer perspective. But then we don't use it. We just don't use it. We are always on the mode with the mode on this self perspective mode. So how can you become a risk manager or insurance sales guy when you don't have customer perspective? How can you become a teacher if you cannot look at yourself from your student perspective, right? So it's all about perspective taking, and this is a latent capability that's born with us. And then traits, we talk about honesty, integrity, humility, patience, kindness, compassion, philosophy, psychology, everything, talking about all those different classification. So I can list 200 different traits. I can list 200 different capabilities to become a rich person, happy person, successful person. I think this is leading to, we are not memory machines. By memorizing all those words, we just cannot become great people. And then there are best-selling New York Times bestsellers like grit, perseverance, compassion, or conscientiousness, self-efficacy, all those buzzwords, pop words. But then when these three attitudes align subconsciously, like RGB, red, green, blue. Upon mixing these three colors, you arrive at every different color in the spectrum. Just like that, giving attitude, customer perspective attitude, and productive attitude, these three align. Honesty, kindness, ethics, morals, virtues, critical thinking, problem solving, everything that researchers, strategy and psychology researchers keep on finding just emerges naturally. So that's the key. And then we are born with it, and we
But
just need to awaken this.
Ganzo,
So
I
that's
mean,
the yeah.
been in Mongolia and seeing the toughness and roughness and all of that.
Mhm.
There's one word that you haven't mentioned: brutality, fear, strength, physical. I mean, it's Mongolia. All the men I know from Mongolia, and I know quite a few from Mongolia, you're strong, definitely fearless, a lot of fun, but strong and fearless. All the men I know from Mongolia are like that. It's in your DNA. But tell me, Ganso, Genghis Khan was also feared worldwide. There was some management by fear also, right? He was not a compassionate, mild, loving leader, right? People feared him, right?
Well, I would say that's just appearance, right? So because there are leadership studies, like they discover 5 different types of leadership: a listening leader, an autocratic leader, a dictator type of leader. When I read such studies, I laugh because when I joined a bank, which was in a very difficult shape, it was a multi-billion-dollar bank rescue mission. I was 33 years old that time. So I needed to put my dictator hat that time because if I convene all my executives and, hey guys, I'm here to listen, tell me what we should do. And they would look at this young kid, 33-year-old. He became a CEO. Now he's asking what we should do. He's a joke. No, I just behave. I'm like a god of banking. I know everything. You do that, you do that. Otherwise, your heads will roll. And then after 2 years, the bank saved. And now the people learn. They learn, they understand strategy, they understand customer centricity, they understand giving. And now I don't talk anymore. I just listen there. I just sit there and listen. What do you think? I ask them. So my deputy CEOs, they propose an idea. As you wish, do it. I support it. So you see, and then researcher, they just take a picture or of a moment of a leader, and then, oh, this is his concentrate. No, no, no. Leader cannot be that. Leader should be like a fluid, like a water, depending on the circumstance. So I'm sure Genghis Khan was a multifaceted person. He could have been anybody depending on the circumstance. Yeah, I think he was. Yeah, if he needed to be seen brutal, then he should
Uh,
be, right. Mm.
Michelle, any final questions for Ganso on this fascinating theme that strategy is attitude?
Yeah, I'd say if there's one takeaway that you want readers to have from the book or listeners to have from this conversation, what would it be?
Yeah, just forget about everything you learned about leadership, success, performance, money, marriage, because strategy is also for marriage, right? Whom to choose, how to mend the relationship, and growing up kids, because kid is the end result of your family. And then who do you want your kids to become? So I propose you should raise strategists and use strategy for family, for country, for company, NGO, any problem, any challenge, any opportunity is tackled with strategy. So in order to become a strategist, just trust yourself and look at your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind is very busy. It's very powerful, but that's a good thing. But there's a bad thing. It's full of viruses, as if we imagine it as a computer. So it's like a supercomputer, vastly huge processing power. But then there are many competing programs downloading the bandwidth, the emotions, the biases, the instincts, the habits, the wrong habits. All those installed programs are competing for the processing resources. So that's why you are stressed or you have a depression, you have loss of energy, you have loss of passion and motivation. But then somewhere there in a corner, remote corner of your subconscious, there are these beautiful three attitudes: giving. You are giver, you are born giver, and the customer perspective. You can actually look at the things from the another person's perspective, and productivity, right? Productive attitude. So you revive them, awaken them, and then you really feel happiness. And financial freedom or business success are just byproducts, right? First and foremost, you must be happy, full of pride. You must use your full potential. I don't believe in God or heaven or hell. So this moment is never gonna return. I'm gonna die. So I do love astrophysics and quantum physics. I study them, right? So this is a blink of an eye. Our life is just over. So use it, because you're gonna live just once. Do a good deeds, help people, and fulfill your potential. Because to become a human is a rare opportunity.
Yeah, just you being born, you already are born as a winner. I like the fact that you're saying you're not religious, but when you look into actually most religions, actually the core of most religions are do your best. Go out and be useful. Use your gifts and skills. And with that, of course, means don't save anything. Just give all your energy, all your skills, and all that sort of thing is really beautiful. Ganzo, I was thinking while we're wrapping up now, I actually have one question. And that is, when I took my MBA many years ago, I remember I studied game theory. But that's not strategy, right? So that's a whole different game. But that is being taught. What's the difference? Can you do that quickly?
No, I think I read these frameworks and I mean, I wouldn't say they are jokes, but they are just facets, when you are strategist, they are just, it's like you drinking a coffee, right? So drinking a coffee can be process analyzed, and become a theory. So attitudes, subconscious attitudes are so powerful, and it can result in so many different processes and frameworks and tools. But then you just don't learn strategy from the ends, from results, because the myriads of results is just mind-boggling. So you just go to the source, which is the attitude. So, be it game theory or negotiation skills or decision making frameworks, I wouldn't recommend that, unless you have memory machine, you are like frenetic, like memory champion or
But
whatever, But even if you memorize all of these, it wouldn't make any sense to you. So when I was leading this bank, when I was 33 years old, we did 72 management change, and I didn't read any, banking book. So later on, I went to Berkeley, studied at Berkeley after my banking CEO job, and I discovered the things we did had names, had books, had theories. We just did it naturally, like a Genghis Khan's army, because Genghis Khan army, they didn't read, they didn't have schools. So they just, every country, every warfare, every battlefield, they created new tactic, new strategy. So just think strategy as of that.
Ganzo,
Yeah.
attitude can be seen and felt. You said you like quantum physics and so forth. It's all about energy, really, right? So, what is the mental hygiene that you do to keep yourself in the right attitude? Self doubt, imposter, drinking, intoxication, all of that. What do you do?
I think it's introspection and self-criticism. So many people self-criticize and then they become depressed about it. But ability to self-criticize is a gift, right? You shouldn't be afraid of that. Just like You shouldn't be afraid of waking up at 4 a.m. We are wrongly taught that self-criticism is bad, you know. No, this is the greatest gift you have. But do not afraid of self-criticism. Just let it run, you know. Self-criticize. So every evening I self-criticize like organically. So of course I don't feel good about it. Man, when it's over, when I be enough to you, Ganzo, you know, something like that. But it's okay. Every time you self-criticize, you learn something because this is not going to kill you. So I think introspection, self-criticism is the big mechanism. And then every day is a battle because I do have this selfish and egocentric Ganzo inside me, but I'm just aware of him and it's a constant fight. But I make sure at the end of the day, the giver, the productive Ganzo wins. So I just make sure that side, we just cannot shut it off, shut the bad Ganzo out. It will always be there, crying, asking for attention, emotionally, going wild, he will be there until my death. I am sure about that. But I just make sure every day, every decision, the good prevails.
Throughout the last 10 years, there has been so many books and conversations about, take good care of yourself, don't work too hard, do some more yoga, relax, only be with people who like you, don't be too tough on yourself, don't have too much ego or drive, don't put in too many goals, you will be disappointed, don't, all of that. And yes, and what you are saying is you can wake up 3 a.m. and life can feel like you're eating glass for breakfast. It's fine. If you don't sleep, it's actually a good thing. You're
If there's anxiety attack, it's good. And you must always judge everyone and everything because that's your design. You are born to judge the risks, right? Because every people coming across you is a risk. So you are designed and you are evolved for 4 million years to judge, But then just be aware. If your judgment becomes selfish, becomes egocentric, then it's wrong. But if you are judging as a giver, as a customer perspective, as a strategist, that's beauty, right? So yeah, Soulaima, you just touched a very good point.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Gan. Thank you, Michelle. Once again, a fantastic Saturday. And remember to go on Amazon.com and get yourself a copy of Strategies Attitude. It is a best-selling book worldwide. And also make sure to follow, of course, Ganzo. You can follow the author at Amazon if that's where you buy your books. We will also put in the links in the show notes and on LinkedIn and Facebook. So Ganzo, was that it? Any final notes, or you think that people should go out and put themselves in more danger, challenge themselves, and not be too soft cookies?
No, yeah, don't be afraid. Life is
I
good.
love.
Life is once. Don't spend your life in fear. So thank you, Soulaima, for this wonderful salon. Thank you, Michelle. For my time, it's evening.
Okay.
For your time, I think it's morning.
Thank you, Ganzo. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for listening in live here from the Saturday Salon. And next week is going to be amazing. We're going to talk about the future of AI and trust. And Michelle, you're going to lead that one. Of course, we'll both be there, but don't miss out next Saturday as well. Thank you, everyone, for listening in.